Good morning, everybody. Jean Horton was doing Friend to Friend Center announcements again at church. I've got news for you, she said. Most of you have probably heard that the governor is going to come to the Hamlet Fair in a couple weeks. Well, that's not the only place he's coming. He's also coming to tour the Friend to Friend Center. The rumor is that he's going to give us some sort of community service award. Congregation made interested in congratulatory noise. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you for your help during the past few years, she went on. We're going to need as many of you as possible at the work bee. How many of you think you can make it? I glanced around. Several people raised their hands, including Guy, who was sitting beside me, and Sheila and Cammy. We'll see you there, Mrs. Horton smiled. And don't forget, there'll be watermelon. Okay, raise one finger, the pastor instructed as he began his sermon. We looked up at him from our pews. Come on, he urged, smiling. Raise your index finger, like this. Shyly all raised their index fingers. Now close your left eye. We closed our left eyes. Now touch the tip of your finger to the lower eyelid of your right eye, just under the eyelashes. Now push up gently against your eyeball. I pushed, and the whole inside of the church, including the pastor and everything else, tipped slightly to the right. See what happens? Your whole world rocks. Did yours? I asked Guy. He nodded. What's my point? Asked the pastor. Simply this. Your whole world exists in picture form right there in your eyeball. When you look at me, you're not really seeing me. You're seeing a picture of me that's upside down on the back of your retinas. Your brain then turns it right side up again and shows it to you. Now, before you think I've gone crazy, here's what I mean. I stand here staring out at you. Right now, you are my world. I am having an influence on you. You are having an influence on me. You're listening to me, and I'm watching you to see what you think of what I'm saying. Now look around you. The other people you see are also part of your world. You have an influence on them. They look at you, and your picture flashes on the back of the retinas, and that has an influence on them. And when you leave this room and go to the fellowship dinner or home, the same thing will be happening. Wherever you go, you will meet people on whom you'll have an influence because you are a real person who has entered the world inside their eyeballs. He continued. That means that you and I and everyone in this room is a pastor. I'm not the only pastor in this room. You're a pastor too. Each of you has a congregation. Some of the congregation are sitting right here beside you. You've got another member of your congregation down behind the counter at the convenience store. Others are sitting in the desks next to you at work. And still others are members of your household. And that means that you have an important personal destiny to play in the lives of every person you meet. He looked at us thoughtfully. Okay, pastors, he said, open your Bible and let's listen as Jesus shows us how to be better at our job. A lot of people came to the work bee to help get things ready for the governor's visit. Several years ago, my church had bought a two-story house and set up a small clothing bank. For a while, it was just our church running it. But when Mrs. Horton took over, she got other local churches involved, which made her work a lot easier. Since her husband had a high-paying job, she could spend most of her time there, supervising volunteer crews. Cammy and Guy and I arrived at the center pretty early. Sheila called out happily when she saw us. What kind of thing do you want to do? I glanced around. Just give us orders. If you could help sort clothes, that would be great. Let's go upstairs. We trudged up a narrow staircase. Cammy, you go to that room. That's women's clothes. I'll be with you in a minute. She led Guy and me through a dark, polished wooden door in an odd-shaped room. It wasn't cube-shaped like the rooms downstairs. The slanted roof cut sharply into the walls on both sides. Half the floor was crowded with racks of clothes on hangers. 5 or 6 barrels made of heavy tan cardboard stood up open to one side. Wide strips of newsprint lay on the remainder of the floor, and on them were piled men's jeans and shirts and dress slacks. Okay, Sheila said, handing us each a sheet of paper. Mrs. Horton prepared these instructions on the word processor. She talked us through them, quickly explaining where to hang the different sizes. Do we put anything in the barrels? Guy asked. Ignore the barrels, she said. They're going to be sent to a warehouse in California, and from there overseas. They've been sitting here for about a month. We should really get them filled up, but Mrs. Horton and I will take care of that. Just before she left the room, she said, If you have any questions, I'll be with Cammy. I scanned my instruction sheet and was going to throw it away, but I decided to save it. I slipped it between the pages of my sketchbook and balanced the book on the edge of one of the barrels. That was heavy, said Guy. What was heavy? What the pastor said about our eyeballs and our world being inside there. Yeah, and how he said everybody is a pastor. I'm not a pastor. I'm probably not even a Christian. I thought a moment. I remember once that he said that pastor really means shepherd. Well, I'm not a shepherd either. If you influence other people, you are. But I don't influence anybody. What about your mom? I asked him. You can give her a good day or bad day, right? I slid a 36-33 pair of pants onto a hanger. When you help her with the daycare kids, you make her day a lot easier, don't you? He thought a minute. Maybe. And what about those street kids Friday? You were influencing them. They wanted you to come back and teach them how to juggle. Well, if you mean like that, are you going to? Am I going to what? Go back and teach them how. Maybe. You also have an influence on me, I said. How? I turned a pair of shirt sleeves right side out. When you tell me you can't figure out why I'm a Christian, I feel bad. Sorry. Don't feel sorry. You can't help it. If you if you really honestly can't understand, that's not your fault. I meant that I just feel bad when I see how you honestly feel. He shrugged. Sometimes I think there's something to it, and then I think of my dad. I know. But what you said on the bus is starting to make sense. We worked in silence for a while. Guy let his eyes wander around the room. What's behind there? I glanced where he was pointing. A 3-foot square piece of plywood was nailed to the wall in one corner. That's the opening to a passageway, I said. You've seen the ones upstairs in our house. The roof slants down so sharply that the builder just made a new wall closer to the center of the room. It leaves a crawl space between that and the real outside wall of the house. Wonder what's behind there. Just dust and plaster laths. I'm going to go check it out. He walked over and pulled cautiously at one corner of the wood. Hey, this is loose. One corner of the plywood came away a few inches, then slipped out of his fingers and smacked back against the wall. A dime-sized scrape of white paper on the floor skittered along on the tiny breeze. It's dusty in there, I warned him. He pulled again at the corner and peered into the blackness. Then he hiccuped. Mark! What? There's something in there. It looks like he pulled the plywood farther out and adjusted his head as so as much light as possible could enter. Mark, he breathed. It looks like a purse.